Freedom. The word that makes Americans puff up their chests, wave their flags, and insist, often loudly, that they invented it. But what happens when these self-appointed champions of liberty try to explain it to the Brits, the Australians, and, well, anyone with even a shred of common sense? You get chaos. You get confusion. And most importantly, you get comedy gold. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Now, don't get me wrong. Americans are passionate about their freedom. They've got the right to free speech, the right to bear arms, the right to order a 6-4-ounce soda with extra sugar. The list goes on. But here's the thing. When they try to explain it to the Brits and Australians, it usually sounds less like a history lesson and more like a bedtime story, told by someone who clearly missed the last century of world history. Take Britain, for example. The land of stiff upper lips, tea, and queues that go on for miles. For centuries, the Brits have lived under, well, a monarchy, laws, and social norms. And yet, Americans somehow think that freedom is skipping class to have fireworks in the garden or shooting bottle rockets at traffic lights. To the British, it's adorable, in the same way a puppy chewing your slippers is adorable. Until the house burns down, that is. And then we have the Australians. Australians, bless them, have a very relaxed understanding of freedom. Freedom in Australia is not just a word, it's a lifestyle. You can surf, you can barbecue, you can wrestle a crocodile, probably. So when Americans try to explain freedom here, it's like watching a toddler lecture an Olympic athlete on gymnastics. The Aussies just nod, pour another beer, and say, "Good on you, mate." Americans love to talk about their Bill of Rights as if it's a sacred scripture handed down from the heavens. And sure, the document is important, historically signify. Let's not forget the classics. Americans trying to explain freedom in terms of guns, healthcare debates, and political protests, while the Brits and Australians are busy thinking, "Mate, freedom is having healthcare without bankruptcy and not being shot in the supermarket." And this is where misunderstandings bloom. Because Americans see freedom as explosive, loud, and sometimes slightly illegal. Brits and Aussies see it as practical, sustainable, and, frankly, a bit less about shouting. Hollywood has played a massive role in shaping this perception. Americans grow up believing freedom involves leather jackets, motorcycles, and a giant explosion every 10 minutes. And then they come to the UK or Australia and try to lecture people about it, and the locals can't help but think, "Bless your heart, you've got the enthusiasm, just not the subtlety." And yet, it's not all bad. These attempts at explaining freedom are endlessly entertaining. Watching an American passionately defend their right to own a pet alligator in Florida, while an Australian casually mentions the Great Barrier Reef is under threat? Comedy gold. Watching a Texan insist that freedom means shooting fireworks indoors while a Brit sips tea and raises an eyebrow? Pure documentary-grade humor. Because here's the truth. Freedom is relative. It's not a one-size-fits-all concept. To Americans, it's a performance, a declaration, a flag-waving, barbecue-fueled spectacle. To the Brits, it's civility, history, and a carefully managed queue. To Australians, it's easygoing, sun-soaked, and occasionally involves wrestling a dangerous animal for fun. And when these worlds collide, well, you get this beautiful, confusing, chaotic mess called Americans Explaining Freedom Abroad. So, next time an American tries to lecture you about freedom, remember this. It's not entirely their fault. They're passionate, they're loud, and yes, sometimes they're hilariously wrong. But if you're British or Australian, just pour yourself a cup of tea or a cold beer, nod politely, and enjoy the show. Because nothing says entertainment quite like a confused American explaining freedom to the rest of the world. In the end, freedom is funny. It's messy. It's different for everyone. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what makes it so brilliant. Thank you, Americans, for the laughs, the confusion, and the chaos. We'll be watching with a cuppa or a stubby in hand. Welcome back. If you thought Americans trying to explain freedom to the Brits and Australians was funny before, hold on to your teacups and stubby beers. Because Part 2 dives even deeper into the chaos, confusion, and outright absurdity of these cultural collisions. And yes, it gets even better. Let's start with the classics. Food freedom. Americans love their freedom so much that they insist it applies to everything, including what goes on their plates. Supersized fries? Freedom. A burger the size of a small dog? Freedom. Putting ketchup on absolutely everything? You guessed it, freedom. Meanwhile, the Brits are trying not to choke on their fish and chips, and the Aussies are quietly wondering why anyone would need a soda that could hydrate an entire football team. But don't tell an American that. They'll defend it like it's a constitutional right. And then there's healthcare. Ah yes, the great American paradox. arguing that freedom means you should choose your healthcare plan while secretly praying you don't get sick because the bill might bankrupt you. To a Brit, used to the NHS, and an Aussie, accustomed to Medicare, it sounds like a horror story. And yet, Americans still insist it's freedom in action, passionately waving charts, graphs, and sometimes their favorite action figures. Next up, celebrations, fireworks, parades, and explosions. Americans believe that freedom should be celebrated with enough pyrotechnics to be visible from space. Brits look on politely, occasionally raising an eyebrow, thinking, "We've got Guy Fawkes, and that's usually enough." Australians? They've already put another shrimp on the Barbie and are laughing at the sheer volume of noise while sipping a cold one. This is freedom as performance art. And yes, it's both terrifying and hilarious. Ah, guns. No discussion of American freedom is complete without them. Americans often try to explain that owning firearms is the ultimate expression of liberty. To the Brits, who grew up with polite but strict gun laws, and Australians, who once had a mass shooting that led to sweeping reforms, this is, let's say, alarming. Watching an American defend their right to carry a rifle while the rest of the world quietly wonders if common sense left the room, now that's documentary-grade comedy. Then there's the history lessons. Americans love to lecture about the Founding Fathers, the Revolutionary War, and how they single-handedly invented freedom. Meanwhile, the Brits are thinking, "Ah yes, that little revolution, we remember it." And the Australians? Well, they're imagining how this sounds next to their own history of convicts, surfboards, and crocodile wrestling. The result is an epic, unintentional comedy of errors that makes for some of the best cultural content you'll ever witness. But let's not forget the interactions. Americans often try to bond over freedom by using over-the-top phrases like "God bless America" or "Land of the Free." The Brits nod politely, sometimes sipping tea, and Australians shrug and say, "Fair dinkum, mate." The Americans leave convinced they've inspired awe and respect. The locals leave convinced they've witnessed performance art of a very specific and very loud kind. And don't get me started on language. Americans, bless their hearts, try to use British and Australian slang to connect. "Fancy a cuppa?" they say. "No worries, mate," they exclaim. The results? Utterly cringeworthy. Brits smirk, Australians laugh, and the Americans leave feeling like they've achieved cultural enlightenment, while in reality, they've just created another episode of international comedy gold. So, what's the lesson here? It's simple. Freedom means very different things to very different people. Americans see it as passionate, explosive, and occasionally illogical. Brits see it as measured, polite, and slightly ironic. Australians see it as laid-back, sun-soaked, and occasionally involving dangerous animals. When Americans try to lecture the rest of the world, chaos, laughter, and disbelief inevitably follow. And maybe, just maybe, that's the beauty of it. Freedom doesn't have a single definition. It's messy, it's hilarious, and it's completely relative. Watching Americans try to explain it abroad isn't just entertaining, it's educational, if only in the sense that it teaches the rest of the world patience, restraint, and how to keep a straight face while someone waves a flag in your general direction. So next time an American tries to lecture you on freedom, pour yourself a tea or a cold one, watch the spectacle unfold, and remember, the world might see freedom differently, but at least it's never boring. And thanks to Americans abroad, it's never short on entertainment either.